Okay, we are recording. Transcription has started.
Okay, it is 12:04, and I'm going to call the meeting of the Vermont Community Broadband Board. Call the meeting to order. I'm looking at an agenda. Before I do the agenda, first I'm going to do roll call. We have all board members present. Brian, Laura, Dan, Holly is on by phone, and myself, all attending virtually. And then for staff, we have Alyssa, Rob, Christine. Do we also have Stan?
Stan is here.
Yes, I'm on. Thank you.
Okay, and Stan. So meeting is called to order. Are there any changes to the agenda? And there's a revised updated agenda that came out on Friday. The date was on Friday.
Patty,
Go ahead, Holly.
this is going to be a pain because I cannot see you to flag you, and I apologize in advance. I hope you saw my notice of my technical issue this morning.
Yes.
So there is an agenda change to allow for a discussion of middle mile grants, but we don't have an agenda addition to talk about the grant document that was circulated to the board after the last meeting. I think it would be great if we took a moment to discuss what the staff's approach to the BEAD grants and the whole grant scenario are, so that we can catch up to where staff is and not just go on to the next grant.
Okay, can we add that under number 5 on the agenda, which is BEAD timeline and Q&A?
In Q&A.
Yeah, that was
I
actually
mean-
the intention of that line item.
Okay. And Holly, I'm
All
looking
right.
at the agenda that was sent out on Friday the 19th at about 9 p.m.
Okay. Well, I think I have the wrong agenda saved, and that means that I'm going to be not much use to you. So I'm not sure that I'll stick around for the meeting. But anyway, yes, as long as we're covering it, that's great.
Okay, yep.
Okay, we might be here.
The only changes that I see on the agenda are to add the BEAD issue and the change of the timeline. Instead of adjourning at 3:30, we're going to plan to adjourn at 4.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
I'm going to make a motion that we approve the agenda circulated on August 19th at 9 p.m. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Dana seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye to the agenda.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, agenda is as carried. First item of action to take is the approval of the August 8th meeting minutes. I'm going to put a motion that we approve those minutes. Is there a second?
Second.
Brian seconded that. A discussion of the minutes. I just wanted to raise under second to get there. Wait a second, I just got to float down here. Under item 5, which was an update on the confidential negotiations with Northwest Fiber and Memorial Fiber. I think there should be at the end of the paragraph, the last paragraph, that we returned from executive session and no action was taken. Christine, can you have the meeting minutes changed to reflect that?
Yes.
Are there any other changes to the agenda? I'm sorry, to the meeting minutes of August 8th? Okay, hearing none, the motion is revised to include that one change on item 5. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Next on our list is Southern Vermont Construction Grant Application, item number 3. Christine, I'll turn that over to you to tee us up.
Okay, so let me make sure. Okay. So at the last meeting, we had recommended approval of that, but we hadn't had CTC's review. We've had a couple meetings and a couple reviews, and one of the sticking points was that Consolidated, of course, we talk about in the outside plant requirements, there's a requirement to have 3 tubes of fiber available for growth. Now, of course, Consolidated uses a different design than the CUDs. And we've asked them to respond with how they plan on handling increased capacity. And in my opinion, they've given a healthy response, which is, we have what 10 gig from to serve the distribution fiber. They keep 100 gig between their hubs, and they have redundancy built behind their hubs. The few hubs that they don't have redundancy on, we're covering that in the middle mile program. And they also, as they use what's called ribbon fiber rather than tube fiber. And they also have the capacity to, add fiber quickly should they run into problems. So in my opinion, this satisfactorily answers how they're going to handle the increased growth within their existing design. But I'll have maybe Kellis is here. She can say more about her review.
Yeah, so and to add to Christine's comments, Consolidated or Southern Vermont is only asking for funding for a portion of this network, so one geographic area, and they are Consolidated is utilizing the remainder of their network to serve as the backbone to serve this area. So and their backbone ring is 100 gig ring throughout their service territory, which is kind of beyond this this service area. So they have plenty of electronic capacity, and they also have additional fiber capacity if they need to upgrade their electronics. But it is not clear that it's 3 tubes, but I do feel like they have plenty of capacity to support that backbone and any future growth. It just doesn't follow the outside plant standards as written by the letter, but they do have the capacity.
Tell us, can you give us an overview? So the last time we talked about Southern Vermont, there were there's several outstanding questions. And can you just go through an overview of where you are now in terms of that review and your position on it? Any comments?
Yeah, so we had a meeting or a couple meetings with Southern Vermont and Consolidated to talk through all the questions, and they answered all the questions satisfactory. The biggest items of question were the outside plant standards, which they provided response for, and which we've just addressed, and then the questions around ownership and the way the contract was structured, which they also answered those. Those were the biggest 2 outstanding items, I would say. They did provide some additional information on some of the other questions we did ask, but those were not as big of question marks. And so at this point, I do feel like they can fulfill the requirements, and they can provide strong services in the area. So I don't really have any outstanding questions at this time. It's really up to whether or not the board feels like they meet the requirements at this point.
Okay. I see Laura has her hand up. Laura, you're up.
Sorry. So I am trying to understand the transactions that are happening here between VCBB, Southern Vermont, and Consolidated. So I understand we will provide funding. We are being asked to provide funding to Southern Vermont, which will in turn purchase strands, or this is what I think is happening. Maybe this is not what's happening. I'm trying to understand what the transaction is. We'll purchase strands in Consolidated fiber. And yeah, I guess I'm trying to understand what is the thing that Consolidated is doing here? What is the, what are they providing here?
The Consolidated is going to operate and maintain the network, and they will also construct the network. And some of the majority of the core electronics and Consolidated and Southern Vermont can weigh in on this, but will be owned by Consolidated, and if needed, in certain areas, it will be upgraded or like additional capacity added for this area. As that's the electronics. As far as the fiber, they will be constructing fiber that Consolidated will be, that Southern Vermont will be owning. I'm trying to break it up so it's easier to understand into infrastructure, which is the fiber. So they will build, whatever fiber is needed to serve this area. And Southern Vermont will own those pieces. And any electronics that is not isolated to this area will be upgraded, or added capacity will be added, but those will be owned by Consolidated.
So,
And
so
the fiber they'll own is the strands within the wire, right? Tell us.
Yes, whatever strands are necessary that are necessary for this construction. It may end up being a whole cable, but it may also be strands within a cable in various parts of the network.
And so tell us how, I asked these questions last time. I've reviewed, the answers to your memo. To your mind, what kind of sustainable accountability does this CUD have the ability to ensure with Consolidated?
So they have regular reporting that Consolidated has to provide to the CUD on the operation, I believe, of not only this area, but also the larger Southern Vermont area, that they will be reporting. I think it's quarterly. I apologize. I don't recall that part off the top of my head, but they will have
reporting on RDOF, right? So they have to do that anyway.
No, they're following the RDOF reporting. So they are reporting on RDOF, but for Southern Vermont's purposes outside of any RDOF funded area, they will also be reporting in the same manner they report in RDOF. So it's the same reporting structure that they're going to provide, the same reporting metrics. And they did express that they were willing to discuss that further with Southern Vermont if they needed additional information or required additional information.
And there's still no financial, there's no payments to the CUDs or of any kind? No rental payments, no lease, no nothing.
There's no payment of the CUD to Consolidated, and there's no revenue share or profit sharing from Consolidated to the CUD either.
Okay. So financing goes one way, and okay.
And can I ask a question that's along these lines right here, Laura? Can I insert?
You know, Holly, I'm done. So if the chair is ready for you, I am done.
Thank you, Laura. The floor is yours, Holly. Go ahead.
So tell us, have you reviewed the actual contract between Comcast and the CUD?
Between Consolidated and the CUD, I
I'm
did,
sorry, Consolidated, yeah.
yes, I
Sorry
did
about that.
review the contract, but I
So
cannot
did
provide
you-
any legal guidance
Yes,
there.
I understand, but I'm going to just rely on your subject matter expertise here to ask. Did you see any downtime standards in the contract? And did you see any penalties for not meeting operating standards of any kind?
No, neither one of those were outlined in the contract.
Thank you, that's all.
Okay, thank you, Holly. Tell us in that same perspective, one of the requirements of Act 71 is the assets that are funded through the grant in the event of a default would go back to the state for receivership or some sort of, the assets remain subject to state purview. I know you're not in a legal capacity, but it looks like you to opine on that, whether the contract addresses that sufficiently. And, from your perspective, and then Stan, if you are on, if you've had a chance to review that, I'd like to hear your thoughts as well.
So the contract does address the ownership aspect. It does not address where it defaults to, if I recall correctly. It does address that ownership of any portions funded by this grant will be owned by Southern Vermont. Outside of, however, there is ownership that Consolidated does retain, which is the investment in the network electronics and things that are, I'll say, shared resources that you cannot like decouple in the event of any kind of default. So for instance, if they have a switch and half of it's being used by Consolidated and they have to upgrade to add, additional ports or additional capacity to serve this particular area, that switch and whatever investment is made into that is still, ownership is still retained by Consolidated.
Okay.
The fiber strands, on the other hand, which it can clearly, you can say, okay, these 5 strands are yours, Southern Vermont. They can clearly identify those. Clearly, that can be a clear separation. That is something that Southern Vermont will retain ownership of. But those things that are intermingled that they cannot decouple, Consolidated will retain ownership.
Okay, that's very helpful. Stan, can you jump in before I go to Christina and Laura?
Sure. Yeah, I did take a look at the contract and agree with Tellus's summary. And to Patty's question, I'm sorry, to Holly's question about the downtimes being in there, those are will be in our final grant agreement. That's where we put those provisions.
Yes, but that means, Stan, just to be clear, that it could be the case that it's not necessarily enforceable against Consolidated because it's not in their operating document. It's a condition of the grant that for as long as the VCBB exists can be enforced against the CUD, correct?
That's something that's possible. It would definitely be enforceable as long as the VCBB is around. But after the VCBB is around, that's a good point.
But it's not a term in the operating agreement between the two parties, between Consolidated and the CUD. I'm just trying to make it clear that
yes,
it could be in the grant, but how enforceable and how much is it a part of the operating scenario is different.
right.
You're
Dan,
on
are you
mute.
all- Dan, are you all set?
I'm all set, thank you.
Okay. You're gonna go to Christine, but before I go to Christine, there are some other hands up from the general public that are part of this meeting. And at this time, we're only taking board feedback. There is time during public session to give input from general public's interest. So just want to put that out there. So Christine, you are now up.
Yes, we've, in the grant agreement, we are going to address the specifications on. Consolidated has agreed to follow the FCC specs that are now in place for the BEAD program, which I think are adequate, which means that they're guaranteeing that they'll have less than 100 milliseconds latency for 95% of time. They will have 99.9% uptime, which equates to about 8.75 hours per year. And they'll meet the speeds for 80+% of the time. So they've agreed to the standards. Now, as far as enforceability, we have not addressed, that may be a policy discussion for the board at a later date. We have not established a policy for enforceability with any of the partners or the CUDs themselves. So I think that's probably an action item we should put in the parking lot.
Okay, why don't you go ahead and add that to the parking lot?
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions? Dan or Brian?
None from me.
I don't have any, Patty. I think I'm going to state the very obvious here. Like, this is a very different partnership than any that we've looked at before from other CUDs. I'm no judgment on that, whether it's good or bad or whatever. It's just very different. So we would expect that some of the metrics and some of the business case stuff would be different as well. So I just want to, I think I'm stating the wildly obvious there, but hope everybody gets that.
It's a good, I think that was a good thing to raise, Brian. That's very evident. This is a very different animal that we're looking at. The question for the board is, are we ready to call a vote on this? Are folks ready to vote?
So last time we spoke, you didn't have what you needed. Do you feel like you've fully gotten an equivalent amount of information on this operating agreement and partnership that is equivalent to what you've seen in some of the other CUD partnerships we've had your help in evaluating?
So yeah, I feel like all of the outstanding questions are answered, and we did receive all of the information that we requested to be able to review it. I think the main points at this time are the performance metrics, such as was stated, the outside plant standards, which are slightly different considering the build, and then the ownership aspects. Those would be the biggest items, which are that it's not an issue from a technical standpoint. It's more of how the board determines what's appropriate.
Right, and that's in line with what my earlier comment was, which is it's a very different nature of partnership. Therefore, those characteristics are different as well, which you've pointed out.
So can I make a comment, please? So I'm going to vote no on this application, and the reason why is because I don't feel the CUD has an adequate opportunity to meet the criteria in our statute. So they don't have the opportunity to hold Consolidated accountable. They don't have the opportunity to terminate. They don't have the opportunity. I don't see that there is a timeline enforcement opportunity for build out. And so all of these criteria that are incumbent upon the CUD's grant of money meet the criteria of Act 71. In other words, we're trying to ensure accountability for delivery of service. And we haven't even talked about affordability really yet. So you may feel that it's been reviewed and that you're ready to vote, but I have to let you know that I'm concerned about the structure of this particular collaboration.
Holly,
if
are
anybody
there specific
would-
items that could be provided that could address those concerns from Southern Vermont?
Yeah, they could change their contract. So and I'm opening my, I'm showing my cards here so that if staff has done work on this and has identified these problems and knows why they're not addressed, or if there are criteria that in the grant that will be enforceable against Consolidated, I'm asking you to tell me that I've got it wrong, because I would prefer to vote yes.
Christine, do you
Patty.
want to respond to that?
Yeah, essentially they don't get paid. If this is kind of a moving target for us as staff, because we have, we've approved grants with WCBT without these conditions. So this is, if the board requires a policy on this, I'm probably, when you hear the rest of the meeting, you're probably going to realize we aren't going to get to that till around October. So it's just, but that I will point out that you have approved grants without this before, and we aren't going to pay them.
So
they-
Christine, you're forcing me to point out that I asked to start with policy decisions over a year ago. So, and this was among them.
Yeah, that's all right. But the board speaks as a board, not as an individual. Yep.
I'm clear.
All right. So I just leave that out there.
All right, I'm going to go to Laura.
Sorry. Yeah, I am not convinced about that the issues that I raised at the last meeting have been addressed around sustainability of the CUD, in order that there can be accountability for these funds and for the service that these funds are going to procure. And, it would be my hope that that's something that we could get to. It doesn't seem like it would be impossible to get there, but I am not seeing evidence that we have gotten there. I don't know why this CUD would continue to exist and what they could do a year from now.
Brian, go ahead. And then I'm going to go to Rob.
Yeah, I think I don't want to, I just think it might be helpful to invite some of the CED folks to comment during this time and not during general session, since we're on this specific subject, Patty. I mean, I think a couple have had their hand up, and if we're missing something and they can clarify, it would be most productive to do it now rather than trying to recreate this in public comments. It's my opinion.
Agreed.
But I understand for hands up right now or from the general public versus somebody from the CUD. I'm not sure that is going to be
Okay.
somebody from the CUD that would like to speak. I will entertain that, but I don't want to open this up to just a free for all kind of thing, because then they just lose control of the meeting.
That makes good sense to me, Patty.
Okay.
Yeah, Eric can
That's what I
speak
saw.
to the CUD.
Eric's hand is up, right?
All right, let's go to Rob, and then we're going to go to Eric.
Want to make two quick points. First, in any and all of the grant agreements, if there is non-compliance, we can be hauling whether it's the CUD or the company or whatever other eligible provider back here and disallow the grant agreement. It would cause a delay, but there's some teeth in there. The other big tooth is they're not paid until this project is complete. The second point I want to make is Southern Vermont has not even accessed the pre-construction or capacity funds. They've been encouraged to do so in terms of being able to have staff person to take on the accountability and oversight role going forward. But I'll just end there because I'm sure Eric has plenty to say on this.
Okay, let's go to Eric, and then we'll go back to the board members at that point. Eric?
Sure.
Hatch?
Sure. Thank you. I think our CUD has talked about this quite a bit. In terms of accountability, in some ways, I believe we have built into the contract more accountability than you could probably get otherwise, in the sense that we're holding both Consolidated and the CUD accountable. We have written into the contract performance reviews, and if the CUD or a town does not believe that they are getting adequate service, then Consolidated needs to appear before the board and explain that to the town. I don't know. I think that's fairly unique. I think that's pretty much in the spirit of a partnership where we are trying to resolve a problem. We're in this together. We both succeed if the others succeed. And we really do have a proven product out there that is affordable. It's very affordable. There are published prices. There are evidence of the product performing to system standards. It's something where Consolidated is adhering to all of the federal guidelines. And to the point about what the VCBB is looking for, it hasn't been stated what those performance metrics are. So in terms of equity across the CUDs, across the state, there should be one standard that is followed. And I think being held out because we are early on in completing our mission, that those haven't been stated, it doesn't make sense to us that we would have to come up with our own set different than what we've already agreed to.
Thank you, Eric. I'm going to move over to Dan.
I just wanted to clarify, Rob, I thought I heard you say that the grant monies would not be released until construction was completed. And I take that as an assumption that it would be checked off meeting the requirements. Is that right?
Yes, that is accurate in this case.
Thank you.
Yes.
The only other thing I would want to mention that I didn't, and I apologize, is that there is a termination clause. So it's the severability. So if they are not adhering to the standards, which, as we discussed, need to be stated, there is severability, and there's a mechanism for us to take those assets that we have purchased on behalf of the state and deploy those with another provider. And it's at arm's distance, or there's a third party that would be involved to help establish what those rates are for deploying those assets to another provider.
Okay, thank you. Over to Laura.
Yeah. Thanks, Patty. So unlike other partnerships that we have seen, I think this is the first partnership with an entity that has had more than one service quality investigation opened up at the state of Vermont with it. And I think that's relevant in terms of being especially clear about accountability here. So in terms of not adhering to the standard and reclaiming those assets, as I've heard Eric talk about, who is going to do that work, Eric? Can you talk to me a little bit about why the CUD has not, something that would really alleviate some concern for me is if the CUD did actually have a staff person, or was, had a plan for a person or an entity to hold these folks accountable. These folks have a track record. This company has a track record. It is not a good one.
Yeah, it has track records, and not only do they have the prior non-fiber network track record, as mentioned in 2 weeks ago, they do, and they own up to that fact that it is not good, and they have goodwill to overcome. They have a new management team, they have private investment, and they have shown over the last few years a dramatic increase in those complaints as a result. Those complaints are on copper, not on fiber. And they also have a track record on fiber. And they do not have, and I know they're willing to share what those are, but it's not performance issues. They have mentioned things like they dug up someone's lawn during install, those kinds of things that just are, happen. But they have, this product is live. They have a body of evidence, which speaks very highly of their delivery. And on Fidium itself, their I forget the name of it. It's their network provider scores, which are very high. They're much higher than the industry. And again, they have a track record. They are delivering something today and accumulating evidence that they are a different company.
So, Eric, again, I'm going to express my appreciation for you and for all the work that your team has done. I understand that this is a different type of CUD and a different scale of problem that you're trying to solve. And I think that I think it's possible to do it in this way and with this partner. But I think given the track record that they have, which included things like maintenance and having enough labor to deal with maintenance and having enough labor to deal with orders, et cetera. Yes, they are. Yes, they are rolling out, a new name and a new product. And I think it is incumbent upon them to have some goodwill here, which is why I'm a little surprised, actually, that the partnership has come back without just a bit more detail about how we're going to sustainably help you hold them accountable. I think it's in their best interest for this type of partnership to work. I mean, these guys are building whole towns without any funding from us right now. In many places in the state. And so, I am not prepared. I'm not prepared to vote yes today. And I also really want to vote yes. And I think there is a way to vote yes to this partnership. But I'm not seeing the accountability, the plan for accountability, the practical plan for accountability with these folks.
Yeah, I would say, they do have the track record today. In terms of the sustainability, we've discussed this because we're scratching our heads. What could that mean? How would we, as a CUD, hold Consolidated responsible in 5 years' time? An executive director is not going to make any difference to us to get Consolidated to do something. What will is the court of public opinion when they have to stand in front of a select board month in, month out until their services are resolved. Having a profit share only complicates and penalizes the consumer to take some of that of their monthly fee to just put in there expecting an unknown. You know, in order to replicate a CUD, if they're not meeting a certain threshold, you know, we already have the death penalty in there. It's a severability clause, and we can take that and bring it to another provider. No one wants that. But how do you cost that out? Do you want to, you know, is there $1 million bond that we have to invest? I mean, there's just a lot. In theory, yes. That's why we keep going back to the board meetings as the way to shine light on the numbers and on the recourse and remediation of any service issues.
So, you know, Eric, let's say that, you know, that things quickly, it quickly becomes evident, which I don't think that it will quickly become evident, that they're not maintaining the lines, it's a poor product. And let's say that the CUD still exists and the CUD says, okay, we need to take that asset and go secure another entity to provide service off of that asset. Who's going to do that work?
The CUD will, as they have been, be very creative in figuring out what to do. Again, I don't think having an executive director waiting for that day to sometimes potentially happen 10, 15, 20 years down, 30 years down the road, 40 years down the road is going to get us away from that problem. We have that problem no matter what. A divorce in this situation is going to be expensive, timely, and very messy. So I don't and that's why we have opted for public disclosure, public transparency into quarterly performance reviews of the entire district that are open and can be shared. And if we're not happy as a board, then we go and have, or the select board is not happy, they can call Consolidated to report to them. And I think that's very powerful. I don't think that's something that should be, and that costs nothing, you know, to the folks. And so that factored into our affordability discussions as well.
Eric, this is Holly Groschner. I think that this is the crux of the problem, as far as I'm concerned, is what, you know, I appreciate so very much that Consolidated has shifted its business focus in a way that benefits Vermonters, and that its new management team is trying to do its best. But business is business, and I don't think that showing up at select boards is expensive enough a penalty. That's really the problem. It sort of suggests that the embarrassment to Consolidated of having to explain their business reasons for not being in compliance with either the grant or the contract with the CUD is enough motivation. And I just am not in agreement on that single point. So that would be an area where I would ask the CUD to compare to other commercial contracts what kind of remedies might be available, and have Consolidated suggest some remedies that are in their business contracts that would be comparable.
Yeah, I want to just offer one more comment, Patty. Is Patty still here?
Yeah, here.
Which is, I recognize this, again, I recognize the scale of this CUD, the scale of the project. And Eric, you know, a full-time year-round executive director for 20 years feels out of scale with that. So that's not what I'm necessarily suggesting. So just want to put that out there.
All right, Christine, can you jump in and give me your thoughts relative to what you've heard?
Yeah, I also want to say, I wanted to say that we did reach out to Cappy, which we do with standard practice with all partners. CAPI reported back they've seen significant improvements since 2018. In 2018, they had somewhere around, they've seen a 2/3 reduction in complaints. There were somewhere around 570 complaints in 2018, 2021, that dropped to 170. They had 2 escalations last year related to the 911 failures. And of course, Consolidated, those are what they call host isolation issues. They have a couple nodes that are only fed from one direction. Consolidated has been participating in the middle mile program. We're going to correct that through the middle mile program, but even if that doesn't happen, it's going to get corrected. But we plan on, I'll get into that later. So anyway, that's the report from CAPI. Again, I do think, that these, that I understand the frustration with Consolidated, but I will tell you, I'm going to repeat what I say often, trying to support broadband with DSL copper is like trying to, till your garden with a teaspoon. It's just an impossible task. Once you get the fiber, these problems go away. And we've seen that with the data.
So Christine, are you recommending approval of this grant of 9 million and change?
Yes, the position hasn't changed since, if you look at the favorable, we need the additional, I'm not sure what happens if Consolidate goes away with Southern Vermont. It becomes a very expensive proposition. And if you look at the cost per address, if you cost per unserved address is averaging about 5,500. In this particular case, I think it's somewhere around 3,800. So that money is lower because of this plan. And of course, in the NEK, it's a lot higher. So we've got to come up with funds from these areas. We've got to come up with deals like this so that we can fund those areas that are more expensive to serve.
Patty.
Go ahead, Laura.
Yeah, I'm going to say again that it is not just about ensuring everyone gets service. It is also about ensuring there is accountability to make sure that continues in the future. It's about shifting how service gets provided in this state to ensure that the situation we had in this state and have had in the state, a public safety issue, largely connected to this partnership provider, never happens again. It's not just about connecting them, check, done. It's about ensuring the future. It's about ensuring accountability. And again, I will say, I think that there is a way to make that happen here. And I'm disappointed that we have not done it. And I certainly raise my hand to help with that, if that would be possible, or not possible. It is possible if that's something that people are interested in.
Sorry about that. I got a car coming in the driveway, so it's going to get loud with a dog barking. If we create a standard for Southern Vermont and Consolidated, that I think also needs to apply to.
I think the dog won.
Sorry about that. The dog's volume is louder than my own volume. The concern that I have is if we carve out Consolidated in Southern Vermont and say, okay, we're concerned, we're going to make you jump through hoops that nobody else has to jump through, there's a fairness issue with that. We have not required the other CUDs to provide us this certainty with Consolidated. And I understand the history and I'm completely sympathetic with that. I'm just concerned though that we're changing the game and the rules midstream here. Laura, do you want to reply to that or?
Patty, I have a
I mean,
question for you.
I don't think that we have, I don't think we have put in place agreements with less accountability than this. I mean, this.
It's also
Again,
less risk in theory, right? It's less risk in theory because
What is the-
CCI is
well-
taking different risk. It's different risk in terms of construction and build out
So,
and
I mean,
even cost.
so I see
That's the
CCI and
trade-off.
I say, well, so CCI as a partner is significantly increased risk. Because even though they have, a new performance that they're doing right now, I mean, it's really bad what was happening and over a long period of time. And so, with increased risk, I think we should be taking more effort to ensure accountability. And I don't think we're looking at things that are dramatic or over the top. And again, I'm not sure why we are not trying to put those things in place or why CCI is not coming to the table to put those in place as they're trying to clean up their image.
Dan, your hand is up.
Patty, I'm having a hard time hearing you.
Dan, your hand is up.
Yeah. Well, I think that their image on the fiber front is perhaps stellar. As Brian pointed out, with Waitsfield Fiber, the problems just go away. And these incumbents are strapped with, in some cases, 50-year-old copper, which is just not supportable. And that's what they're stuck with. And there haven't been any grant dollars to remedy that. And it doesn't make good financial sense for these incumbents to make these investments because the take rates aren't good enough. And it's a quagmire that the state has been in for quite some time. And now the grant dollars are available. And these challenges, I think, exist with the other CUDs that are going to operate their own network.
So, I mean, Dan, I would respectfully say that, the grant dollars do not exist to give to the providers in the state. They exist to work, to have our communities, to have publicly accountable entities partner with these providers. But it's not, these funds are not here to fix the problem of lack of investment. And these folks, CCI is amongst all of the other telecommunications companies that are spending a lot of money to remain unregulated at the federal level. And that is part of the other issue that we are trying to resolve in this state. And again, I will say, small CUD, small footprint, big, huge opportunity here for Consolidated. Not sure why we haven't seen something come forward. Seems like an easy problem to fix here.
So less cost per mile, fewer costs, few dollars per drop. They have skin in the game. They're asking through the CUD for some grant money. I don't know how much of a leap it would take to get something in, but every other incumbent, Waitsfield and noteworthy here, will have, I think, as Patty brought up, equitable across all of these partnerships, would have to agree to that. And well, I think it's just making sure that we're being fair across each of the CUDs. And when we look at the CUDs who are going to be providing their own services, how will we hold them to the same level of accountability as we hold these partnerships? They're different relationships. Everybody's invested in making sure that the quality is good and the affordability is good.
Brian Otley has dropped off. He has a 1 p.m. conflict. What I'd like to do is, I don't think we're not gonna solve this right now. So what I'd like to do is wait for Brian to come off of his work meeting and then call the vote.
You know, Patty, it seems to me that the directors themselves on this board are very disunified in their approach to these problems. And that comes of not having done our policy homework. And I do think we should spend some time to sort through some of these issues. I have tried to review the contracts themselves. And I don't think that we have a contract between CUD and operator that's as vague as this quite. So I don't see it as the same. I have no problem giving money to Consolidated. I actually think that Consolidated should be a co-grantee on the grant. And I wish other carriers, and I think, you know, there's a question about whether Champlain will be a grantee on a grant. I don't have this predisposition against the existing incumbents, even though it's been a miserable life trying to wait for there to be more investment in fiber in Vermont. But I think this vote should be postponed. And I think we should try to sort this issue so that we are trying to make consistent decisions going forward. If you believe we've been doing the right thing, Patty, that's one thing. But if you think there's room for greater policy consideration, there's no time like the present.
For me, I feel it's a little bit of a fairness issue here. I think Southern Vermont has put in good faith a proposal in front of us. They've worked hard with Consolidated, and I think there are many pros with the proposal in front of us. If there needs to be a little bit more specificity in the contract to get that comfort level, for us to debate a policy and hold these guys up for a month or two or however long it takes us to debate a policy, I don't think that's appropriate. There's a fairness issue here. In the meantime, if there's more information that can be put in the contract to give us the assurance that Consolidated is going to be on the hook to make these towns and the consumers happy and serve them in an appropriate fashion, if that will address the concerns that have been raised, then I would delay this vote to the next meeting and give them time to address specifically these issues that have been raised today. I'm not sure, Brian is off the call right now, and I'm not sure, I'd want to wait for him to come back to have the vote, to be honest with you. But if we can delay for 2 more weeks and have Southern Vermont, have Eric give us something with more teeth in it relative to the consumer assurances, then I think you're going to get a positive vote from everybody. Eric, is that possible?
Definitely. We'd be happy to add other stuff in there. I don't know if we're tremendously much more in a different place than we were 2 weeks ago, because there isn't a standard out there applied to all of the state CUDs. We've been entrusted as a CUD to come up what we think is the best for our district, and we firmly, strongly stand behind that. We firmly believe that Consolidated has stepped up and put their money where their mouth is. They are covering unserved people at their own expense in phase 1, which they've already covered, 500 of them. They are paying for the drops, $3.3 million of an investment. They will be paying for all of the wire center upgrades and equipment upgrades when they're due, so that this network that can go from 2 to 10 gigabytes can handle that. They've been a true partner all along the way and very candid about their prior history, but they have a history. So other CUDs who are starting from scratch, how do we know they have the labor available, the experience, the turnaround times? You know, when you have a blank slate, everything is a promise. You know, Consolidated has owned up to their past, and they've made the investment and have been very transparent about it. And that's where we continue with our contract is to get that in there. But we've already said that we want them, and they've agreed to go and apply. They have already agreed that they will adhere to the grant restrictions. So we don't want to duplicate. We purposely did not want to duplicate what was said by VCBB in the grant requirements in case they get stronger than the contract or differ from the contract. The contract speaks to the VCBB piece. Act 71 speaks to the piece. So we really, we're really getting concerned that we're now a month after where we hoped to be, and Consolidated, we want them to plan to get this first thing, the construction to start first thing in 2023. And we've seen that they can roll this out. So further delay is just going to impact people receiving their internet sooner. The dates are getting close because they have to position all of their labor resources and plan all of that stuff because they do have that footprint that they can call upon. And I just hope we don't, look for the perfect and let the very good and sustainable and accountable, wither as a result. Thank you.
Yeah, Eric, I just want to say, I like the business model that you have in front of us. I think that the cost effectiveness, the financial side is a winner. There's no doubt. What you're hearing is a little bit of chatter to me. This is to me. It's a little bit of a chatter relative to consumer protection issues. If there's a way for you to develop something, and I completely agree with you, we're not doing this for everybody else. It seems unfair. Completely agree with you. But I think if you give a little bit of time on that and are able to negotiate something with Consolidated to do a best practice, consumer protection standard, something for us to lean in on, I think you're going to get a successful vote. Right now, I'm a little concerned if we call a vote, it could go negative on you.
Okay, sure, understand. Thank you.
Patty, this is Holly.
Yes, Holly.
I greatly respect Eric's commentary on this. I mean, I think he's being logically consistent.
Mm-hmm.
That hasn't changed my mind about how I wish there were more contractual protections. But when Eric references the compliance requirements of the grant as being the teeth in this contract, I have to say that I'm not informed enough as a board member to understand what the ramifications of that mean. And so maybe one of the homework pieces we could take on as a board is to have staff provide the grant agreements as they stand. I asked for this at least, I think, last meeting, if not before. We should be reviewing the grants as written so that we see what kind of teeth they have, or have a presentation on what the standard teeth in the grant agreements are. Thanks.
Thank you, Holly.
Patty.
Go ahead, Dan.
Okay. So I'm not sure if this is going to be helpful, but I see the risks here in two parts. One is in the construction phases. And since in this case, we would be paying, or Consolidated would be paid post-construction, essentially post-delivery of service, that's extremely low risk. They wouldn't get their money until it was checked off of meeting the requirements. So that aside, then the next part is the affordability and the servicing of that, maintaining that infrastructure. And there is competition out there with Starlink, and it is in their best interest to keep their customers on. My personal experience has been, it has been stellar. I'm not advertising for them, just like there's a focus on this from Consolidated's perspective that is different than trying to keep the old copper running. And I understand that. So when we look at the CUDs, the risks I just described, both of them exist in strong positions. We give the money and we hope for it all to be built, but if their costs increase, then maybe not all of it will be built in the same time frame. In the Consolidated case, there's a guarantee of a certain period of time over, and if they don't meet that, they don't get paid. And in the CUD version, I think it's more variable. So this is about managing the risks. I think on the Southern Vermont CUD here, it's relatively low. I think it's very low on the construction piece, but I think on the maintenance piece, it's relatively low. I'm in support of it, but if there's some way we can reach some, quickly reach some sort of I don't know what that would even look like. And I hear what Eric is saying. Where's the standard? And that's something that all the CUDs and all the grant recipients would need to live by.
Christine, is this something that you could sit with Eric and come up with some sort of consumer protection provision?
Well, I'd love to hear some suggestions from the board, because I don't have a clue at this point how you would do that. You think about Consolidated, that this is less than 1% of their entire footprint. So again, we've got middle mile programs to focus on, and you'll see in the rest of this thing. I mean, we just don't have the capacity to do this right now. But if a board member wants to take this up with Eric, that's fine.
So Rob had said that he said early on when we started this conversation that there are protections through the grant process for the funding going out. Help me with that. Either Rob directly.
Well, I think let me just say that I think one of the things I think we need to do is come up with a standard for all that applies to all. I don't know how you hold the feet to the fire. We're not a regulatory agency, and they're agreeing to the standards. I'm one of these people that comes from, you design quality and you don't enforce it after the fact. So I'm a big faith in good network design, which I know that's because if you've got lousy network design, you're going to have problems forever. So we're focusing on good network design, and we're using fiber. So I look at this and say, I'm not sure. I don't see the same issues that some of you are seeing, because they committed to all this solid design. But how do you enforce it? I'd love some ideas on how you would do this, because we're all talking 10,000 feet right now, but I don't think Eric and I or anybody knows what you're asking for.
From what I have heard in listening to this conversation, is that Consolidated has a historic track record that's not stellar.
But it is good. Kathy has told us in the past 3 years.
So I understand that.
Changes.
I completely agree with what Brian and Dan have both said in past meetings and today. The fiber does change a lot of these complaints. Some of the complaints are purely, my service is really rotten, and there's nothing you can do about it relative to copper because it's the technology. But there are other things around the edges that the service can be controlled for. And the point that I'm hearing is we've got a person, an entity that's been a bad actor, and now we're going to go and give $9 million with no strings attached. What I'm hearing is a little bit of strings attached for this particular situation is going to be helpful to move things along because of the past experience. And fiber does change a lot of this, and I think 2/3 of the complaints go away. What do you do with the other third?
Well, I think 90+% go away, to tell you the truth.
Or whatever the metric is.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm hearing from this conversation, that because of the history, that there's a cry for a little bit more teeth in the contract relative to.
Well, I'd love to know some ideas of what those teeth would look like, because I'm at a loss. And I think we're all at a loss. I think Eric's at a loss. We just don't know what would make the board satisfied.
I'm just spitballing for the sake of throwing an idea out there. What if I'm trying to break at odds here, but what if there was a 10% retainer for 12 months on a rolling scale, and if they didn't perform, then you at least had the CUD had something to hold over their head to ensure that performance of construction thus far is remedied. And we're talking about the service component, because they won't get paid for the construction until it's completed and is servicing properly. So if you get 1 gig service, I'm actually getting 1 gig service. And if 10% is held back, I have no idea if this would be even palatable. But I again, with what Christine said, I don't know what we could offer.
I think that's a great idea, Dan. And most downtime contracts have some penalties for, on an annualized basis, not meeting performance criteria, right? So, and it's a financial penalty. So, I don't want to increase the cost of consolidated service, but they're also not a regulated utility in that way. So we don't have to treat them the same. We don't have to worry about that cost being built in the same way. So I shouldn't affect their rates. And I think that that's, financially reasonable to do that. Do I wish it was more evident in the other contracts? Yes, I do. Do I think it gives more teeth to this contract? Yes, I would think it would give more teeth to the contract. And it is enforceable under the scheme that has been proposed. I believe it could be enforceable by individual towns or the CUD, however it had existed into the future. So that's a very constructive comment. Thanks.
Yeah, I think that was a constructive comment as well.
This is Rob. I just have a clarifying question on that, if I may. So you're talking about holding back 10% each year, or holding back 10% of the grant over a period of several years? Because we are dealing with the deadlines around ARPA.
So I don't know, Rob, I'm just spitballing here, but I was thinking 10% of the grant, the continuum of sending money out, as work is completed, I imagine they will be paid for those stages of work that is completed. 10% would be retained for arbitrarily a period of 12 months to ensure that they're performing adequately over the next 12 months. And that's usually enough. You go through a full winter, summer cycle to see if tree trimming and undergrounds and all that is working properly. And then they would get their money. Now, the incremental cost to Consolidated would be the carrying costs of construction of that 10%. It doesn't come for free. And if we do this, if this idea is adopted, then I think any incumbent that receives that, like Waitsfield or anyone else who pops up, would have to be treated exactly the same. And I think this gives the CUDs an unfair advantage, but I'm just trying to find a creative path to move this forward today.
We actually do have something along those lines in all the grant agreements, but it's based it's to ensure that they meet the reporting requirements. I don't have the agreement in front of me right now. I believe it's 6 months. That is something we could be potentially flexible on if that provides some more comfort. Like, I'm comforted by the fact that they have moved forward with requiring attendance at select board meetings and doing regular performance reporting, and the fact that they're not paid until it's actually operational for any portion of the network. Like, I find a lot of comfort in that. I am concerned that if we wait till the next board meeting. Based on the doodle poll, the next meeting that everybody is available isn't until the end of September. Not even 4 people are available prior to that. So I don't have a full understanding on what the consequences would be if we pushed it until then. We could do something in terms of kind of like we did with Maple, where there was contingencies associated with approval. Just a thought.
All right, what I would like to do is wait for Brian to return, and I'm gonna call a vote when he returns. I would like to put this on the table for everyone to vote on, but I would like to do it with 5 of us present. I think we all have our issues on the table, whether or not we could come up with a consumer protection provision that meets the concerns in a timely manner, I'm not sure. But I think what I'd like to do is, based on what we've heard so far, is call a vote on this. If it's a no vote, then Southern Vermont, Eric, you're gonna have to go back to the table and bring us something.
Understood.
So one other piece of accountability that's kind of built into the process is I don't believe this is going to be the last partnership we will see with Consolidated. If they want to be coming back for more funds via the VCBB, well, they're going to need to show what they can do and live up to it.
All right, let's, in the interest of time, table
Patty?
Southern Vermont. All right, go ahead, Laura.
I would just offer one more comment, just to be really, really clear. My concerns are not about Consolidated's ability to take the funds, construct the network, and hook up the customers. It's about ongoing, what are the mechanisms that we are putting in place to prevent the situation that compelled this board and these CUDs to form to begin with.
Understood.
We are
It's the
here.
service. It's the consumer service protection.
Yeah, and it's not, I'm alarmed actually with Rob saying this is not the last proposal we're going to see with Consolidated, that we're going to push this today. I would like to, that makes it even more imperative to me that we are very clear about the consumer protection and accountability metrics with these guys. This is the incumbent carrier who allowed extremely dangerous conditions to open up in this state.
Okay.
Laura, I would mention
What I would-
that there are other incumbent carriers that we've been dealing with as well, and maybe not with the reputation that this
Or
one
the
has had in
complaints.
past. Yes,
Yeah.
but we have not been consistent in saying what our standards are with regard to incumbent carriers. That's all.
Okay, I have a good sense of where everybody is right now, and I don't think we're going to change positions at this point. So what I'd like to do again is we're going to pause and table the vote on Southern Vermont, wait for Brian to return from his 1 o'clock call. And then once he's back, we'll do a vote on this issue, on this grant. All right, Christine. Next on the agenda. We have
Yeah,
next number 4, NTIA feed middle mile application.
Yes, and Joanne Hovis is going to be joining us at 1:30 for this discussion. She is the executive director of CTC.
Is she not on the call right now?
She's not on the call right now.
Okay, is there anything else on number 5 we can take up? Policy presentation
Well,
discussion?
I think I could tee it up, during the next 8 minutes, so 7 minutes.
Okay.
Because I think we're going to have part of this in executive session to talk about some contractual questions, contractual
For the end,
proposals.
this is for the NTIA bead middle
Middle
mile.
mile, yeah. So where we are, the middle mile program is another one of these programs that's moving really fast. We got CTC to get started on this in early July. They've now, we requested that CTC develop a statewide design that addresses all the redundancy. It ties into the CUDs, with geographic redundancy and resiliency. They have they've done extensive work on the design. Meanwhile, I've worked with a number of the incumbent providers, Consolidated, VTEL, and First Light, to be partners on this application. So the background on this is the middle mile program. There's $1 billion available, but the NTIA only wants to give 10 or 15 grants. So they're looking for $7,500 million applications. Initially, I said we're not going to even get in this program. But when our discussions with the NTIA revealed to us that if we did a statewide application with a number of partners, with our private partners participating, this could be a very powerful application. So it was a long shot, but we did manage to get the partners to agree to participate. And now we have a design that's worth about $100 million. Now, the problem is we have to come up with a 30% match. That 30% match can't come from federal funds. So that's a real challenge. And we have to have all of this answered by September 15th. We've got just a couple of weeks. So we're looking at a various set of options. One is to get a letter of commitment from a bonding organization, which I could talk about in an executive session, and with that letter of commitment to bond the 30%, we would also take all the existing fiber and commit that as value, because you could do it in kind. So our first goal is to get this to be owned by the CUDs. But we also, and this is the discussion with the board, we also want the option to be able to turn this over to a private provider and do IRUs for the long term. Because the worst thing we do is walk away from 70% of this network being constructed. We could get a private provider in a worst case scenario to provide us a long-term IRU, a highly discounted IRU for 25 years to provide the CUDs. That would be cheaper than the CUDs building itself, and also free up the grant money that was being used for the middle mile to be used somewhere else. So I know this is a controversial proposal. However, the way the NTIA has set this up, they've set it up targeting private telecom companies, which is why they've come up with that 30% requirement on a match. It's walking away. I know it may be untenable for some folks to think about a private provider owning this and giving us discounted long-term IRUs. But it's still, the CUDs are still going to get that network for half the cost if they build it themselves. Because even building in, the margins that the private telecom providers, you're still going to get this thing at half the cost. So the idea is one option is to put this out to the private telecom providers to say, hey, how much of a deal are you going to give us for 25-year IRUs? Because it's going to be a big lift trying to get, and we can talk about an executive session about the details of it, but it's going to be a big lift trying to get commitments for up to $30 million by September 15th. So I'll lay that out, and I think we should have that discussion in executive session, because I'll be talking about private providers discussions we've had, as well as some of the bond discussions as well.
Christine?
There is definitely a lot to unpack in there, and that's gonna generate obviously a long and lengthy discussion. Before we go into executive session, Brian is back. I'd like to move back to Southern Vermont and do a vote on their construction application of $9,009,085. Brian, so while you're away, we continue to talk about Southern Vermont. A lot of the turf and the terrain. I don't think there was anything new that was put forward in terms of positions. There's couple folks that want some increased consumer protection standards because Consolidated is a past known entity with some problem statements or some problem behavior, we call problem practice that have occurred in the past. Some other comments are relative to, the proposal is cost effective. It's a good proposal. We don't want to hold them up, want to push forward. So I don't think there's anything new to reiterate for you. And I would like to call the vote.
Can I ask
So
one question, Patty?
Go ahead, Brian.
Just, was there any discussion about making a vote contingent on having some, an attempt to strengthen some of the, protections or the teeth in the agreement in terms of accountability?
Yes, and in fact, if I were going to vote on this, I'd want a contingent on a provision that is a holdback, because I don't have the language of the grant in hand, and I don't know if it's enforceable against Consolidated. So I'd like to see language in the document according to a holdback provision suggested by Dan.
Okay, thanks.
So Dan, if you had suggested, remind us your suggestion in terms of numbers. You're muted.
Sorry, I was just suggesting, since we're paying post-construction, that maybe a 10% holdback for 12 months on each phase would be sufficient. And the only cost in doing that would be the cost of money for those 12 months short-term finance, which should not a lot.
Well, only on the 12% or on the 10% too, right?
Right.
Yep.
Dan, are we going to require that of everybody going forward?
Well, I think that if we do it to one, we would have to do it to everybody. And what I was pointing out is, to the CUDs who don't have a track record, they can't construct without us. By doing this, that would just slow construction down. But I was trying to provide an idea of something to move this forward. So if it works for the incumbent, assuming they have.
Yeah. I feel like some of the other operating agreements have other teeth in them from an enforceability standpoint that would, that are an alternative to what Dan's just laid out here, because this Southern Vermont has, it feels like less teeth. They have different risk profile. So, I'm not sure we would need to make every future grant having the same condition, unless it just happened by circumstance to match a lot of the characteristics of Southern Vermont.
Yeah.
And their CCI partnership.
And as I mentioned, all the grant agreements do have a small holdback. I'm trying to find out if it is 10%. I think it's more like 8%, but I'm trying to see if I can confirm that. But it's not something we haven't done before, and we can negotiate the payment terms for any grant agreement.
But it should belong in the contract.
And do we have a sense, like, guess this might be a question for you, Eric, like, do you feel like you've gone as far as you can with CCI in terms of putting teeth into the agreement and accountability provisions?
No, I don't think we've hit any resistance. We've just not had a clear idea of what we should be putting in there.
Yep.
We've been talking about, our board is very comfortable with how they have been performing on their current network, on the Fidium network, and we really have eyed this in more of a how can we make them successful so that we're successful and folks get what they are looking for in a safe, affordable, reliable way.
Yep, got it. Yep, thanks.
Also, this is Rob. I did just confirm in a grant agreement. For most of the grant agreements, since they're not paid, most of the grant agreements, it's not where it would be in this case where we don't pay until construction is completed. But we were holding out back 8% for completion, and then another 2% to ensure reporting for a period of 6 months. So if those two are combined, it's parallel to what we're doing elsewhere. We don't
And I
have another
think-
agreement yet that's structured like this.
And I think we would have a track record as well by the end of their construction, because it's starting to accumulate now. We have 500 unserved. So, and there are other Fidium network customers in different areas, which can show whether they are, living up to what they're saying.
So I would just jump in, Brian, because I think you also may have missed Rob's comment earlier that this is not likely the last partnership that is going to be put in front of us with Consolidated, which increases for me the need for us to get this right.
All right, I'm gonna put a motion on the table, see if anybody seconds it. That we move forward and approve Southern Vermont's construction grant request of $9,009,085, contingent on them coming back and addressing the consumer protection division with Consolidated. Similar to what we did with Maple.
What was that last bit? I don't see this as consumer protection at all. So when you throw that phrase in, it confuses me. So are you making a specific, are you just saying they have to come up with a amendment to their contract, or are you saying what the terms are?
They have to come up with an amendment that addresses service to the consumer. This is what this is about in my understanding of this conversation. I don't want to prescribe to them what that is. I think they've heard enough from us that they can come up with an agreement. They can come up with an addendum to their contract that addresses consumer protection.
Yeah, and just for the record, 6 months is not enough, but for the performance piece, because it doesn't tell you what your operating standard is going to be like. But I guess you'd have to say, Patty, that at a minimum, the amendment has to be acceptable to staff.
So I would just jump in and say, Patty, that I have heard staff and the CUD both express that they don't know what to do here. So I think we can't just ask them to come back with something. So we either have to give them more specifics, or someone needs to work with them, or
And it's more than consumer
Eric,
protections, right?
Eric,
It's also getting into like project
milestones. Brian, let me jump in. I don't want to
Yeah,
prescribe
sorry,
to them how they're going to manage the service aspect of Consolidated. I think it is their responsibility to come back to us with something. And we shouldn't be sitting here dictating it. Eric, I think you have enough information from us that you should be able to create something. And if you want some feedback, happy to have you talk to any of the board members individually and get some feedback. Laura specifically,
Okay.
I'm happy to respond. I have some thoughts going through my mind. I just don't think this should be a committee discussion to design this issue.
Sure, I would agree to that.
So if you're amenable and you think you can get creative here and come back with, this is what we're going to do.
Yes, we're definitely amenable to that.
You can keep that
Yes.
contingency language open for you so that you can come up with something on your own.
Yes.
so Patty, I'm still going to vote no, but I'm happy to work on this for the future sake. I'm going to vote no because it's not known, and we've been talking about this, and Consolidated could have come forward with something at this point. So
Understood. All right, do I have a second to that motion at this point?
I'm just trying to understand, is the major concern the project execution, or is the major concern the long-term customer service performance?
The latter.
So Laura's up the ladder. Okay, thank you.
They can
Okay.
build it. We have no question about the fact they can put the fiber up and build it. It's how are they gonna serve the customer long term?
Okay.
Manage prices.
Yeah, I mean, frankly, I'd be more comfortable if there was more hooks around. I have confidence they can build it. I'd like more protections that they're going to build it on time. But then the long-term stuff, yep, totally understand.
And they're paid only post-construction.
Oh, is this a reimbursement?
I mean, that's part of the
This
grant.
is
Yes. This is reimbursement.
Oh, there you
So
go.
the construction risk is practically zero.
Yeah. So yeah, and with Dan's 10%, that's all. I'm totally cool with that. But I hate beating this one to death. But long term, let's say construction happens, it goes as well as it goes, whatever. Universal service plan's achieved. Yeehaw, that's a great thing. Long term, these are all going to be CCI customers long term, right? That's going to be their choice. It's going to be their primary provider, and so yeah, I'm just not sure. Having worked with CCI over the years, maybe you could get them to give you some concessions on long term performance, but boy, that would not be consistent with my experience. But again,
Right.
it's fiber, so it's going to be so much better.
Well,
Regardless of who it is, fiber's just better and easier, and people are happy. It's just reality.
So Brian, we built this, the First Light network that came in that was paid with public funds, 2009, whenever that was. That got sold to a private company. So where's the public good that is still connected to that? It's gone. It's gone. And, it's now a private company.
But how are you defining private good if those people have reliable connectivity? Public good. They have reliable connectivity at market rates that they would not have otherwise had. That's public good, even though it's owned by and delivered by somebody else. I'm not looking to nationalize broadband. I know that.
Dog is.
Anyway. So we had a motion. Sorry to interrupt that, Patty. I'm terrible on on meeting procedure.
There's a motion on the floor. Contingent on Southern Vermont addressing the consumer protection provision.
Yeah, you need a second.
A second before we can vote.
Question on, is that subject to staff? It shouldn't have to come back to us too.
I think we want to see it, Dan.
So then should we wait to see it before we vote?
Yeah, absolutely, because what's the point?
Right. Because if it
We
comes
did
back
this
and we
with
see it and we
Maple.
don't like it,
We did it with Maple.
different.
Could we
You know,
do the 10%? And if they
I would
decide
not
that they
include
don't,
that. I would not
Okay.
include that. There's grant provisions that deal with the rollout of funds, and they don't get paid until they build it anyway.
Patty, if your
So-
motion has failed, I have another motion that I would make.
All right, is anybody gonna second that? I'll give it one more try.
Well, let me just ask. So is there, if we do that, the condition, if we do what you just said, or you proposed, Patty, and they come back with unsatisfactory consumer protections, right? So we've already provisionally approved, they come back with unsatisfactory consumer protections, then we have to start all over, right? We'd have to have another motion at a future date when they address that. So it just doesn't, I don't see why it makes sense to try to approve this with a condition if they're going to have to come back and satisfy us on that condition.
I mean, I look at it as we did that for Maple. We approved them, and we gave them a contingency in their approval. And whether it's through staff, with Christine and crew approving the specifics of the contingency, we could delegate it to them, the staff.
Yeah, but under the Maple, we were basically telling them you have to have another run at that issue, and if you don't satisfy it, you're good anyway, right? Because we weren't going to pull it back.
Mhm.
It was. It absolutely was. And this, I'm just trying to see if it's exactly the same and we're not going to pull it back. Then again, we take the teeth out of that negotiation, but we could approve it now with that condition and hope it goes well, fingers crossed. But if we're saying we want that whatever consumer protections we hope they get to come back to us for approval before it's fully approved, then it makes no sense to do a vote today. Because that's just,
Patty, I
because we
have
will
some-
not have.
All right, Laura, do you have,
I have some more specific language.
okay, go ahead.
So that we approve contingent on the applicant coming back with a strategy to assure continued viability of the CUD in order to enforce accountability for performance by CCI. That's what I want.
And if you don't agree that they have it, Laura, where are you in this process?
Right.
If I don't agree that they have,
It's
You're
the same
asking them to
thing.
come back. You're asking them to come back. So why are we making a motion?
yeah, to Brian's point is what you're saying.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Christine?
Yeah, I would feel much better with the board being specific, because I feel like I don't know what's going to satisfy the board at this point. You know, if you stated that, look, hold a 10% contingency, you know, we can actually build that into the cost model and have that as a penalty or a reward. But the problem is right now, this is so unspecific that I feel like we could, you know, I don't, you know, the next meeting September 19th. And then, you know, beyond that, you know, if we don't satisfy the board with what we come back with, because it's so amorphous right now, I'm not, you know, I don't know whether I don't know what's going to happen.
You know,
And I'm just
Christine, I look at this as a utility executive, and if somebody said your performance was really bad before, you need to prove we're gonna hold your feet to the ground. I could come back with a standard saying, I'm gonna meet this CAPI level performance. I would come back to you with something very creative. I'm not gonna whiff on that. So, and
yeah, we'll chase
he's
this
got enough,
10%.
he could go back and design something. I would encourage Eric to reach out to Laura, reach out to me, give some pointers. And I think with a little bit of work, I don't think that's a hard assignment to do, personally.
Yeah, but just remember, electric utilities are regulated. These are not
But-
regulated utilities.
And Christine,
So we'll come back with something around the 10% because you've given us some direction.
Patty and Christine, you're talking as though this is going to end up in the grant. It's not about the grant. It's about the contract between the CUD and the provider.
Okay, all right, got it.
The
We
grant is
will-
contingent on that.
That's right.
Can I just jump in? You know, we would like to have a vote, even if it's a contingent, because we need Consolidated to start the engineering work. This is a large company. They're going to compete with other projects in-house. I don't want to risk our CUD members not having the first priority, which they will have with at least a vote today saying that this is going in. So I don't want to put that at risk. If we're trying to come up with something that satisfies the consumer piece of it, you know, I don't think that should delay all of the other work that can continue.
Yeah, my concern, Eric, is I've heard from the folks on the board that I don't think we have a affirmative vote. You're gonna get voted no.
Okay.
That's my reading of the tea leaves here.
Is a no vote helpful at this point, though? I mean, Eric, would that be helpful in terms of going into negotiations with CCI?
No, it is not. It's unhelpful. It's unhelpful to the CUD people who are counting on getting phase 2A constructed as soon as possible in 2023.
So what I'm hearing is that, Eric, you're gonna need to bring something back to us for the next meeting.
And I'm happy to do that, yes.
Okay. And we will work with you to address concerns, thoughts, and give you a framework to start working from.
So is that precluding a vote today,
Yes. 'Cause I think you're gonna get a no vote is the problem.
even with a contingency then?
Yes.
Well, here's the thing. The contingency would be that you come back for the board's approval of the contingency.
Yeah, if you don't like the stuff we come back with, we just have to keep coming back, right? I mean, you're not going to release the funds next week. It's after construction. So you have that leverage to so that we get it right, but we're not holding up engineering to begin. As soon as
So
we get.
I personally don't mind doing that. I think the reason why Brian and others have brought it up is that we thought it doesn't give you the approval that you need because it's vague. But if you think it triggers something in the process for you to be able to move forward with the risk that your contingency is not met, I don't mind voting yes on that, Patty, if that's helpful.
All right, that is helpful. Just Brian and Dan and Laura, can you show your cards?
I am not voting yes on a contingency.
Okay.
I
Brian?
don't believe, I will listen to everybody else, but I don't believe so.
Okay.
If
I
a
can vote
contingency is required, if a contingency is required, it makes no sense to vote. If a contingency is not required, happy to vote.
All right. So we're not gonna hold
Well-
the vote. You have the votes, Eric.
Yeah, we got
Go ahead, Dan.
CTC here too, so that's,
So,
what we-
if we could stop for a second though, and just think of the risk that we're trying to mitigate, which is pretty low. This is a provider that has more experience than anyone else in the state in running these kinds of networks. And the problems they've had, as we all agree, I believe, is the copper infrastructure does not stand up in the Vermont. It just can't provide it, but their core infrastructure is capable. And the placement of fiber is going to practically mitigate that entirely. And so in the world of risk, I see this as very low risk in terms of them being able to provide a sustainable and reliable service in connecting a household for internet services. And I would encourage us to think that maybe this is the test. This is the test that we give them the money, we grant them the money, and if they mess this up, they don't get another option at this.
But we're not gonna know that, Dan, until 5-10 years down the road.
But what's the alternative?
Your existing.
There's no better alternative. Like,
We don't know this with any of the CUDs either.
Yeah, I agree.
And no other CUD has come forward with a partner with this kind of track record. So, if we have, if Southern Vermont had as part of their contract with CCI, for instance, that, if they hit a certain level of downtime or complaints or XYZ, there's some sort of financial penalty. And some articulation of how their CUD is going to continue to exist, I go to a yes vote. Pretty much. Like, that's what I'm looking for.
Fiber connected services only.
Yeah.
Would
Yeah,
you
I mean,
agree?
and the problem is not just their infrastructure. Their company did not do good things here, Dan. And so I agree that their company and the investment, the massive investment that they brought in, that everything looks great and they are operating like beautifully. There's also a lot of money around right now. It's going to go away.
Okay, we're gonna pull the motion is not seconded. There's no vote on the table at this point. Eric, I encourage you to come back with a consumer protection provision. Talk to Laura, talk to me, we'll help you out, and we will call this vote at the next meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. So let's head back to the NTI feed middle mile application. Are we ready to go to executive session, Christine?
Yeah, let me just, Joanne Hovis has joined us. And Joanne, I did some background. One thing that you have not heard yet is we may have a way to bond this and, but, we can talk about all this in executive session. So if you want to say a few words in public, Joanne, feel free to, or we can move directly to executive session.
Just, it's a pleasure to speak with all of you.
Yeah, you want to say who you are and what you do, just maybe the.
Yes, thanks, Christine. My name's Joanne Hovis. I am from CTC Technology and Energy, and we are very delighted to be working on supporting a range of different processes, including middle mile grant planning.
Okay,
Joanne,
I think.
are you on Zoom via camera because we don't see you?
You're not seeing me?
No.
I see her.
I see
I
her.
can see her.
I can see you.
I didn't see her.
Now Rob's just spotlighted her, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, and
Now I see you. Hello, Joanne.
And Stan, if you could describe why we're going into executive session, I would appreciate that. For the public's sake.
Sure, this is public discussion would be premature. This involves possible contracts with private parties, and we are still negotiating the terms.
All right, I move to go into executive session as premature general public knowledge would clearly place the VCBB or a person involved at a substantial disadvantage, quoting Title 30 VSA, Section 313A1. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed?
And I
Yeah,
believe,
second.
yeah, you have the link.
Okay. We will sign off here and come
We,
back on the other.
we need to state who is going to be in the executive session.
All board members, VCBB staff, and CTC consultants. Anybody else, Christine?
Nope, that'll do it. Thank you.
Okay.
See you on the other side.
Okay.
Very positive towards the CUD concept, and have a lot of questions about this so-called public-private partnership. And I'm on the board of both DV Fiber and Southern Vermont CUD, and I have a heck of a time getting good information about what's going on with Southern Vermont and up-to-date contracts and so forth. But I have to tell you, reading the contracts and being somebody who's been in business for at least 60 years, the contracts are absolutely not customer-centric. They are whatever CCI wants is right and whatever the consumer wants is wrong. There's in terms of pricing, in terms of, in my opinion, hanging a bunch of disparate sections of fiber and then being able to split that up should there be a divorce, you have no value. And it seems to me that if there's going to be a system, it's got to be a system. And if it's a partnership, that means that both Southern Vermont and CCI have to be working together. And should CCI not be able to hold up their end of the bargain for whatever the reason, that whole system should be basically on the block so that it can continue as a viable entity, not a situation where the private asset is used to fund CCI and build their corporate structure and move forward. I think I think that's a difficult concept, and I think it's something that CCI would have a hard time swallowing. But I think that whole private public has to be fleshed out and has to be honored. Um, and it's simply not there. And I think governance is absolutely critical. As Winhall's representative to Southern Vermont, I have absolutely no say in what's going on. Whenever I bring up the strong negatives,
Okay, you're at 3 minutes.
okay, whenever I bring up the strong negatives, they run out of time. And I think that it's critical that I sent you guys an email, or a number of them actually, with my thoughts, and I think a lot of them got addressed by Laura today and others. And I think it's critical that we look at a viable entity. And I thank you for the 3 minutes. I could go on for 2.5 weeks. I thank you for the 3 minutes, but I think my point is relatively clear.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fred. All right, so that's all we have left on the agenda. Is there anything else, Christine, before we adjourn?
Nope, thank you. Good meeting.
Okay, I move.
Christine?
Yes.
Sorry. Patty,
Go ahead, Laura.
did we talk about, Christine, and Patty, did we talk about in a meeting yet, the idea that I had put forward? About documenting what we're doing?
What does that mean, Laura?
I'm just,
Oh, the video?
yeah,
Video documentation.
Oh, that one. Yeah. Oh, geez. Okay. No, we did not talk about that. We have,
so,
yes, an impromptu other business. So you want to take it away, Laura, or should you want me to do the
well,
introduction?
I mean, I would just love to just, let the board know that we're working on to bring them a proposal
Good.
on some means of documenting what has been going on with the build out. And VCRD convened, ran it by Patty and Christine. Could we gather something together to bring to the board? They said yes. Brian Lowe at VCRD made gathered some folks together. Dan Smith, also from the Community Foundation, is interested. Christine and I met with them for an initial meeting, and we're trying to put something together. But the gist is, there are a lot of people involved across the state, public and private entities, and this is historic, what is happening in the state right now. And it would be good to capture that in some way. And so hoping to bring forward a proposal for the board to consider on documenting that. Christine, what did I miss?
No, that's good. And you should know that part of the NTIA, we talk about the template they gave us for planning was, they encourage public outreach. This falls within what Beach.
Yeah, it's a great idea, Laura. Really looking forward to getting a proposal on this. I think it's an excellent idea.
Thank you, Laura.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks to all of our people out there, public and private, working really hard.
Okay, with that, I move we adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
All right.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Opposed?
Bye now.
Guys have it. Bye, everybody.